It's extraordinary to be not only in Washington today, but to be in Georgetown University, because it is such a great institution that has taken real action to rectify the injustice resulting from its past involvement in slavery. Last year, Georgetown President John DeGioia, and unfortunately could not be here today, made a formal apology to the descendants of 272 slaves that the university sold nearly 2 centuries ago in order to remain profitable. It was a very powerful moment, and not only Georgetown had the courage to start a public conversation about slavery and themselves, but the university committed to create an institute for the study of slavery and to offer to the descendants of these enslaved throughout its history preferential status in the admission process. So that's what I call pretty big step to try to remedy past mistakes. And they are worth of praise. Today we are going to speak of slavery with the present tense, unfortunately, because the trade in human beings has never been as big as today. And in the United States, as in most countries in the world. 60% of the slaves are in Asia, but 40% of them are also born in other countries. So the slavery didn't end in 1865. On the contrary, so it's flourishing, it's reaching levels that make this the second most lucrative crime across the United States, one that delivers large profit at very, very low risk for the perpetrators. Many of you already know about my personal commitment to the fight against modern-day slavery. I am passionate about it because slavery is the worst crime, human rights crime in the world, when you decide that a person is a commodity and you can use it whatever you want. It's a complex crime which takes many different forms, from sex trafficking to bonded labor, and among these there is a lot of different forms of slavery. It's a silent crime. The chains are gone, but the exploitation remains the same. People continue to use people as commodities, and as a result, slaves walk among us, and we cannot even see them. As I speak, there are more slaves in the world than ever in history. The Walk Free Foundation estimates that there are in the world 45.8 million slaves. The ILO, which is the UN, the International Labour Organization, is still working on an update to update their numbers, and they say they will do that this year. But they are speaking of 21 million slaves. So it just shows one thing, is that nobody knows how many slaves there are today in the world. And the exact numbers the exact number of slaves is not known, and it may be well above 45 million. We just don't know. The main reason is that those trapped in slavery, in forced labor, as in sex trafficking, are not in a position whatsoever to shout out for help, of course, because they are muted and abused. Some of them don't even know they have been enslaved. Others return to slavery after being rescued just because they have no other opportunity, no other alternative. The lack of precise data around slavery makes the fight against it extremely difficult. How can you fight effectively something that you cannot quantify? If you cannot measure it, it doesn't exist, they say. And we are exactly there. We cannot measure it. The ILO says slavery is a business of $150 billion a year, which is 3 times the profit of Apple. It is a huge number, but it's probably understated. Because I was at a conference of Interpol recently, And a French law enforcement person said that in France they estimate that the sex business online is worth $3 billion a year. So this is a country of 65 million people. So if you take just a fraction of that and put it to the whole world, then the $150 billion of the ILO seem very, very low. This constant contradiction of numbers highlights, in my view, three things. First is that we have probably only seen the top of the iceberg. Second is that slavery is organized crime at its best, and that we fight in a totally disorganized manner. The money that all governments around the world put in the fight against human trafficking and slavery doesn't represent $1 billion. The lion's share comes from the US, by the way. Not $1 billion against $150 billion minimum per year. So it's really not fair. The third reason is that the lack of data makes it impossible to measure progress or to show the failure in addressing the issue. It's particularly difficult for the NGOs and the brave NGOs in the front lines to get funding to fight human trafficking when they cannot prove success. So it's a huge issue not to have data about this. What we spend to find human trafficking is just a drop of water in an ocean of corruption and greed. And I always wonder why so much progress has been made recently against money laundering, against drug dealing, and not against human trafficking, which is the worst of human crimes. Evidence from police across the globe tells us that it seems that a lot of drug dealers are moving to sex trafficking because it is so much more lucrative and in total impunity up until now, almost total impunity. What we have tried to do with the Trust Conference since 2012 has been to bring together the many different players in the fight against human trafficking, local and global, to get to know each other, to get to connect among us, to coordinate, to brainstorm, to partner, and in the end, to take real action. And we have taken some very big actions. So we act together, not individually. And I really hope we are going to not act alone any longer, but collectively, very soon. Our efforts have paid off. We have created a real movement of people, corporations, governments, and civil society united by the desire to take real action. We see that at the Trust Conference, which takes place every November in London. We have also launched regional conference, and we did one in 2015 in Hong Kong, one in 2016 in Singapore, and this year in Washington, D.C. I see in the room a lot of familiar faces and a lot of friends. And thank you for being there. It's just a show for me, a vote of confidence in what we try to achieve all together. Today, we will start by exploring a very big issue, which is the role of that technology plays in the fight against trafficking, by looking at the broader argument for and against data encryption. What comes first? Individual privacy or the need to use someone's data to stop further crime? To speak of this very difficult question to answer, because most of us are very attached to freedom of speech and privacy, we will have two remarkable speakers, Cyrus Vance, who is the Manhattan District Attorney, and Ken Ross, who is the head of Human Rights Watch, one of the best organizations shedding light on all the issue in human rights around the world. Also today, we will hear directly from those who have survived human trafficking and made their life a mission to ensure others don't go through the same ordeals. These are all remarkable survivors who have come over their trauma and now help others to get out of it and fight human trafficking. Thank you for speaking, because it's not really easy to do that, and thank you for sharing your stories. These are men and women who have been abused and exploited, even branded as personal belongings, some of them as children. Their stories are chilling, but they are also giving us tremendous insights and the hope that if law enforcement leverages their knowledge and courage, we can get sharper at fighting modern-day slavery. Thank you for being here. After the break, we will look at forced labor in the supply chain and at the role that corporations can play in ensuring that the goods that we are buying are not tainted with slavery. And I say corporation, but I also think of investors, because investors, when they look at where to invest, should look at the question of forced labor in the supply chain of the companies they want to invest in. As we know, the problem of the supply chain is not an easy one to solve. And when you consider the huge size and the complexity of today's supply chains, every day, from the sourcing of raw materials to the manufacturing process, millions of people are involved in making the good that we buy. Do we have absolute certainty that our consumer choices are not enriching people who are forcing other people to work without pay? No, we don't. What are companies doing to make sure that the answer to that question can be a sounding yes? 75% of slaves in the world are in forced labor. It's a huge number of people, millions of people who are paid nothing but for their subsistence. In the late afternoon, there will also be time for action. We will be hearing from two great change makers who have launched two powerful initiatives at our last London conference in November. They will be telling us about the progress of their action. Talking progress, I'm happy to announce that earlier today, the Thomson Reuters Foundation has launched a practical toolkit designed to help European financial institutions to fight slavery using financial data. The toolkit includes a set of red flags tailored at the European markets, together with case studies and resources that will help detect and report suspicious financial patterns that may be linked to human trafficking. The paper is being shared on a confidential basis, and a close group of banks and financial services, anti-trafficking NGOs, and other institutions, including the Intergovernmental Financial Action Task Force and National Financial Intelligence Unit. The white paper is the product of the European Bankers Alliance, a working group that we established in 2015 on the model of what we had done before with Cyrus Vance, with the American banks, to look at when there are patterns of human traffickers through credit card data, personal credit card data of people. Look at the digital footprint that we leave everywhere and that sometimes can indicate financial crime. In Europe, the alliance includes Barclays, HSBC, Western Union, Standard Chartered, Deutsche Bank, Santander, UBS, ABN AMRO, Commerzbank, Allied Irish Bank, Nordea, La Banque Postale, plus NGOs, the UK Commissioner Anti-Slavery, and the law firm Herbert Smith. Now, before we start the conference, I would like to thank our main sponsor and partner for this conference. It's Dun & Bradstreet, as well as Thomson Reuters. I'm incredibly grateful to both of them, because without your money, we could not organize this conference. So it's very much appreciated, especially because it is not easy to sponsor and to speak of issues like slavery in your supply chain or in sex trafficking. Because we want to make today's event available to the widest possible audience, the conference is live streamed around the world through the Thomson Reuters Foundation YouTube channel, but also the Trust Conference website. And it will be live on Facebook. So we expect you to use the hashtag TrustConf17, TrustConf17, you have it here, in your social media post to ensure that we are all connected across the right channel. Now, before we start, and I hope for the last time, I would like to dedicate this event to Nazanin Zaghari Ratcliffe. She's a colleague at the foundation. She has been arrested in Iran 1 year ago, more than 1 year ago now, when she was going to show her daughter to her parents. Who cannot come to the UK to see her. She's a binational. She has been arrested. Her daughter has been kept in Tehran. It's more than 1 year. Nazanin spent months in isolation. She has been condemned on ludicrous accusation that she wants to overthrow the regime in Iran. She has been condemned to 5 years. The appeal has been refused twice, and she's in jail. She's suffering. Well-being is a real issue because she has obviously mental problems and physical problems because she has a disc in her neck which is damaged, and they don't want to send her to a hospital. So once again, I ask for clemency for her. I'm 100% sure that she is innocent. The foundation doesn't operate in Iran, and Nazanin had nothing to see with Iran except that it is where she's born and where her family live. This is a picture of the whole foundation in London showing the empty desk that has not been filled.